Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Staying Sane. I'm Jay, and my partner in crime is Hussein.
Yeah.
So, this week, rather than just recounting the news because it's Christmas Eve, we thought maybe let's just chat about the myths around Christmas and some of the traditions that have been appropriated by Christians over the past few centuries. So if anybody watching, if you have any questions, by all means, please pop it in the chat, and we can answer your questions for you if there's something specific you want to know. So I thought maybe first off, I'd start off with where the date 25th of December comes from. So the feast of the Annunciation of Mary is on March 25th. So that's when Gabriel announced to Mary that she was going to be carrying the Christ child. So what's
Mhm.
9 months from March 25th? December 25th. So, and pretty much everybody knows that, December 25th, is right around the winter solstice, right? The 21st, 22nd. So the 25th, ties in with all the pagan festivals of the winter solstice. So, and like I said, it's 9 months from the feast of the announcement that Mary was carrying the child. So, let me just pull up my notes.
But I have a doubt here first.
I doubt about what?
Yeah, it's like you were mentioning about appropriation of uh, different things from other religions or other
Yep.
stories into Christianity.
Yep.
So, uh, by coming from a country like India, where Hinduism is the major religion here, which is known for this appropriation and acceptance of different religious, what do you say, ideas and other things. Is that a crime for adopting
No,
something
it's
new or
it's it's actually quite common. Um, I just had the word on the tip of my tongue.
okay?
But it'll come back to you. But there is a word for it, and I'm sure I'll remember it. But it's syncretism. Yeah, syncretism. So
Singers, yeah.
most religions are syncretic, that they borrow like
Mm.
it's I would be hard pressed to find a religion that is arose wholly in isolation with no influence of any other cultures. That maybe some of the earliest religions that have gone extinct and been replaced by the major religions, but all the major religions have borrowed from each other. um, I talk about, in the book that I'm working on the history of secularism, in my chapter on classical antiquity. Specifically, I talk about the interchange of ideas, of philosophical ideas, of math and science between India and Greece. There's uh, quite extensive cross
Uh-huh.
pollination of ideas between India and Greece back in the era of classical antiquity. So,
So by what
it's not
time?
uncommon. Which time for what?
Yeah, for this Christmas to be a part of Christianity, by what time that originated like that? The way we
Okay,
see
well,
it today.
that's so like the way you see it now with like Christmas trees and lights, that's a fairly modern thing. The
Hmm.
Christmas tree actually came from Germany through Queen Victoria because her
Hmm.
husband was the German Prince Albert. And then he brought the tradition of the Tannenbaum, the Christmas tree, to England, which then spread throughout the Commonwealth and around the world. So the Christmas trees, it's like 200, maybe 200 years old from the mid 1800s. So a bit less than 200 years old, that tradition.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's not unusual for religions to be syncretic and to borrow elements. I mean, it happens all the time. Like you see the Zoroastrian influence in Second Temple Judaism, which then gets absorbed into Christianity and into Islam. This dualistic, eternal battle between good and evil is a Zoroastrian concept of the ancient Persians, which is borrowed by all three. It's fallen out of favor in Judaism, but Christianity and Islam still use it. Um, so 9 months after the Feast of the Annunciation, you get December 25th. So in my notes, so Pope Julius the First, who was the Pope from 337 to 352, he is credited with establishing the 25th as the birth celebration in 350, and the oldest surviving reference to Christmas being celebrated on the 25th comes from 354 in the chronography. So, and just backing up a little bit, so it was in 221, Sextus Julius Africanus implied the birth on the 25th as the incarnation took place on March 25th. So that comes from around 221. And then Pope Julius in 350 makes it the official celebration, and then by 354 you have the first reference to Christmas being celebrated. So Christmas is also, as I mentioned, it's the winter solstice, but it's in the ancient Rome. You have Saturnalia, which was on the 17th of December, and it's associated with gift giving. You also have from Mithraism, you have Sol Invictus, or the unconquered sun, which was on the 25th. So you have lots of these pagan uh, influences that are coming in, like with Saturnalia, with the solstice, with Sol Invictus, all of them sort of playing some. Whether to what degree one played more of a role than another, no one can really say. Um, so then, what some of the imagery? All right. So then, with Santa Claus,
I,
so you have
can
the.
I can I
Go ahead.
can I add
Sure.
something to this?
Sure.
So yeah, when you mentioned about the festivities of Christmas to be something that was added to Christianity after or in the modern times, that means it was not originally the part of Christianity, right? That's what you meant to say.
Christmas celebrations? Well, no, I'm
Yeah.
I'm talking like I'm talking all of the like the Christmas tree,
Okay.
and like the Yule log. Like I'll get to all of that. So the Christmas tree
Hmm.
is about 150 years old, at least in the English speaking countries. Like as I said,
So.
it was in Germany, but that comes more from the Nordic
Mhm.
pagan mythology of the Yule log, the Christmas tree. That's where all that those are all pagan Nordic
Okay.
ideas, especially
S-
the Yule log.
Okay. So with regards to the original Christian belief system, is there something which is part of that, the original Christmas celebrations?
Just the celebrating the birth of Jesus. So so
That's
to
it.
to back so to back up a little bit. So
Yeah.
the virgin birth narrative gets corrupted. So again, so people who've joined, we have 3 viewers currently. So if you have any questions about Christmas or this, just please feel free to pop a comment in the chat for us to pick up for you. So the birth narrative, which occurs only in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. Mark doesn't talk about it. John doesn't talk about it, and Paul does not talk about it. Now, the earliest Christian writings come from Paul, roughly 10 to 20 years after the crucifixion in, say, 30, maybe somewhere between 30 to 35 CE. So Paul's writing in and around 50, about 15 years after Jesus has been killed. The first gospel, the Gospel of Mark, is thought to have been written around 65 or 70. Now, there is some scholarship, newer scholarship, that's claiming the Gospels are actually second century. We actually did a podcast for AAI. If you go on the AAI, if you're watching, go to the AAI channel on YouTube, and it was within the last 6 months. And I had two scholars on who had employed software that does linguistic analysis. I was saying that the gospels really couldn't have been written until the second century, so into, like, around 151 CE, and showing some linguistic commonalities with other later Christian writers. Things like, Nazareth doesn't even appear, like Jesus is supposed to have come from Nazareth. But there's apparently, and I this was something I had learned, that Nazareth doesn't even appear on any map until the second century. That there was no Nazareth existent at that time, which that was something new for me. So if we stick with the traditional dating, that Matthew is about 65, and then, sorry, Mark is about 65, and then Matthew and Luke come shortly after. Matthew's thought to have been written after the Jewish temple was destroyed in 70, so somewhere around 70, within a couple of years of 70, then Luke builds on that. Now, both Matthew and Luke have the birth narrative, which neither Paul, Mark, nor John have. Now, the the virgin birth narrative comes from a mistranslation. So, Ptolemy. So, those of you who know your history of Alexander the Great. So, when Alexander dies, one of his generals, Ptolemy, goes to Egypt and founds the Ptolemaic dynasty. One of his descendants, I believe it was Ptolemy the Second, was uh, rather of a scholar king. um, he's the one who legend says, I believe, created the Library of Alexandria and commissioned a copy of every book in the world that he wanted, including the Hebrew Bible, which known its Greek name is the Septuagint. So it was apparently they commissioned like 70 Jewish scholars to write a Greek version of the Jewish Bible for the Library of Alexandria. Now there are numerous discrepancies in that between that and the original Hebrew Bible. So at the passage in Isaiah 7:14, where they said um, not savior is probably the wrong word, but that might have been the term they used. I don't remember. Um, the passage. So this was at the time of the Isaiah 7:14 is written at the time of the Assyrian conquest. So this is those of you who know your Christian history that the 10 northern tribes of Israel were conquered by the Assyrians and scattered to the winds. So Isaiah 7:14 is being written at about this time. Now Judah, so there's two separate kingdoms. Now there's a lot of conflation going on here that people think there was one Israel. No, there was the kingdom of Israel in the north and there's the kingdom of Judah in the south. Now there is biblical propaganda that comes later that says Israel and Judah were united under David and Solomon. It was one kingdom, and then after Solomon, it fragments into northern and southern. That's complete bullshit. That's biblical propaganda written by the Judahites in later centuries. They were always separate kingdoms. So Israel gets vanquished by the Assyrians and completely wiped out. And as policy, the same policy the Assyrians do, the Babylonians do, the Persians do, you mix the population. So you break the ties of the people to their land. You bring other conquered people in, and you put them in the land of Israel to farm and grow products for trade within the empire, and you move the Israelites somewhere else. Those exiles, right? So it's a policy to make people compliant. So Judah has sued for peace. They see the writing on the wall. They saw what happened to Israel. They sue for peace. They become a vassal state of the Assyrians. And trade and education, this is when Judah explodes as a regional power because they're now a vassal state of the biggest empire in the world at the time, the Assyrians. So their literacy goes up. They're building programs. This is when you see all the monumental buildings going up. Uh, in Judah. So all of the monumental building of David and Solomon, there's no archaeological evidence for that. So this passage in Isaiah 7:14 comes from this period of the Assyrian conquest when Judah is the subject vassal state of the Assyrians. So the Isaiah 7:14 passage mentions that the grandson of the current king, which I believe was, so I can't as Hezekiah, maybe I think, but his grandson is going to be Hezekiah, who was fairly significant. So the passage in Isaiah 7:14 says, like, Hezekiah will be born and he will free us from this foreign domination. Now that passage gets translated by the Greeks, and the word Alma, young woman, because we're all born of young women. I mean, like, fucking duh, right? Alma gets translated to virgin. So the very fact that the authors of Mark and Luke are using that passage is telling scholars that one, they're not using the Hebrew Bible in the Holy Land. They're somewhere else. These are Greek speaking Jews or Greek speaking Christian converts, maybe not necessarily Jews, who are using the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Bible that has all of these mistakes in it. Now, Bart Ehrman actually just posted on that this week. He posted about how the fact that this is essentially hearsay, like this is written like some 40, 50 years after the crucifixion of Jesus, another 30 years to his birth. And it's very much you know a an oral tale that's been passed around, and we all know the telephone game and oral cultures, details change. So the fact that Matthew is using this passage tells us he's not a Jewish or an Aramaic speaking person using the Jewish Bible in Judea. He's a Greek speaking Christian convert living somewhere else. Now, there are differences between the two, between Matthew and Luke. One, the lineage is different; they differ significantly. And I actually created a graphic. I can maybe post it later, but I created a graphic showing how they diverge. So the passage in Matthew, the genealogy in Matthew, actually follows that of, I believe, First Chronicles 3. Don't quote me on that. I think First Chronicles 3 has a lineage of David, which Matthew follows, but he condenses it to get it down to 40 generations because 40 has mystical. mystical properties in Judaism, like 40 years in the desert, Jesus 40 days fasting in the desert.
Islam
So
has
40,
70.
yeah, so 40 is
Yeah.
mystical, as is 12. 12 is mystical in Judaism too, right? The 12 apostles, 12 tribes. So the
Mm.
numerology is there. So Matthew condenses the genealogy from First Chronicles to get it down to 40, and they
So so
descend
so so what's the number for Christianity? It's 40 for the Jews, 70 for the Muslims.
probably
Then
seven, right?
what's for
Because
Christians?
well, seven, like lucky is supposed to be seven, right? And then whether the
7. Okay.
etymology of that is because God created the earth in 7 days or six and rested on the seventh, I don't know. Maybe that's where the seven comes from. 13 is unlucky because apparently that was the date of the
Yeah.
the massacre of the Knights Templar. So, um, yeah. So the genealogies differ. So Matthew follows First Chronicles 3, and I believe descends from Solomon. Luke descends from another child of David, but not Solomon. And then the genealogies converge around Zerubbabel, who was the exilarch. Now, an exilarch he was the king in exile. So when the Babylonians conquered Judah a century after Assyria, um, the exilarch is basically the king in exile. So after a generation or two, then Cyrus the Great, the Persians come along, they free them, they come back. So Zerubbabel is the exilarch.
Mm.
So all of the messianic hopes are pinned on Zerubbabel, but he doesn't step into the messianic role as even though he is a descendant of the Davidic house and as the he's essentially the Persians make him the governor of Judea, but he doesn't appear to have wanted the messianic hopes of the Jewish people. So both of them, the genealogies in Matthew and Luke, actually converge on Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel. So you got to ask, how the hell did that happen if they're coming from different, right? And then they come down and they continue on and they diverge again and they have different grandfathers, fathers down to Jesus. Now, if God is impregnated Mary, then Joseph, as a descendant of David, is irrelevant anyways. Like it's a complete non sequitur, right? You have this genealogy, but then
Yeah.
Joseph is out of the equation, so it's complete. It's completely
So
ridiculous.
yeah, so we are waiting to see that infographic if you have it when you
Yeah,
post
I
it.
can I can find it.
Okay.
So the other thing is the difference between Matthew and Luke are the dates. Now, Matthew's is a little more realistic. It mentions like something around 4 BCE, like that he was born like in the last year of the reign of Herod. Something I don't remember the exact quote, which would be around 4 BCE. Now, the passage in Luke is full of mistakes. It's just glaring errors that are just obvious to anybody with any knowledge of Roman history. So Luke grounds so both of them say they have to go to Bethlehem. Now there's a whole backstory to that, which I'll come back to. So remind me about to come back to the story of Bethlehem. So Mark, sorry, in Matthew, Mary and Joseph have traveled to Bethlehem. In Luke, Luke grounds the story in the census of Quirinius. Now, this is where things get fucked up, right? Quirinius is the governor of Syria, not Judea, right? Now, as we all know, even today, Syria and Palestine are completely different countries, different entities,
Mm.
as they were in the Roman period. So Quirinius is the governor of Syria. You have Pilate as the governor of Judea, but you have the client kingdoms of Herod's children. So Herod's son is king in Galilee, which is where Nazareth is, right? So you have this really complicated overlapping set of who's ruling what, which is off topic, and I won't go into it. But Quirinius is the governor of Syria, so he issued a census between like 6 to 7 CE. So the census would only have applied in Syria. It would not have applied in Galilee where Jesus was, and it certainly wouldn't have applied in Bethlehem down in Judah, which is, a different Roman territory altogether. So one, there was never any Roman-wide census ever. There was it's the wrong guy in the wrong territory. And two, the admonition that you must travel to the homeland of your ancestors to be counted is just freaking stupid. Like,
Mm.
could you, could you, even with our modern technology and the modern computer systems and DNA and 23andMe and genetics, could you figure out what village your ancestor came from 800 years ago? that you would have to go back to be counted for the census. So the whole Lucan birth narrative is just full of mistakes from start to finish. Okay, you have a question?
Yeah, yeah. In that case, the perfect homeland would be Africa. We all came from Africa. So how
True,
about that?
true, yes. But
Okay.
for the purposes of the Romans, like just your own local area is
Mhm.
where you were supposed to be.
For the
Oh, there's
sake
my
of
genealogy.
story building.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I did
So
find the genealogy. Let me see if I can just, opening it up. Let me see if I can share it up to the screen. Present.
okay.
Let's see, will it let me do it?
I have another doubt here. That is, we all say that the extent at which the Europe is losing their faith in Christianity is increasing day by day, and more of them are turning out to be more of atheists and non-religious and all. So even then, we are seeing, uh, yeah, we can see that.
Okay, okay, go ahead and finish your story, and then I'll come back and talk about this.
Okay. So even then, we are seeing a lot of festivities going on in the name of Christianity, Christmas and other things. So how can you correlate both of these, like losing the faith, but at the same time increasing the celebrity celebrations? So
Well,
how's that happening?
because it's become much more of a what do you call it? A family celebration, right? Like one in the West and probably here in the East as well. Christmas has become very commercial. That's why the Christians keep saying keep the Christ in Christmas. So
Mhm.
it's taken Christmas has taken on a life of its own. Like it's gone beyond its original foundations to celebrate the life of the savior of mankind. It's become much more of a time for families to gather and
Okay.
to celebrate, togetherness and being happy with what we have. So
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 it's like it's losing the spiritual element, but at the same time, it's gaining the commercial part.
right, right.
Okay,
Yeah.
that
Okay.
sounds good.
So you can see my screen.
Yeah.
It's clear. Okay. Yeah. So the actual succession, so what I have in this red line is the actual succession that follows from in these red lines. Okay, so you can see both from David. So Matthew is following First Chronicles, the genealogy given in First Chronicles 3. And then Solomon, so Matthew is falling from Solomon, and then I've got so then you can see here in the brackets from Rehoboam to Jehoshaphat, and then it goes to Jehoram to Azahiah to yeah, yeah, yeah. And yet here in Luke, it's coming from Nathan, and then from Nathan, both Nathan and Matthew, sorry, Luke and Matthew both converge on Shealtiel, who is the grandfather of Zerubbabel, and then it splits again. So you can see First Chronicles then descends from Hananiah, Matthew follows Abuyud, and then Luke is
I
following
see.
Reza. So you have completely different genealogies. Um, let me zoom in a little bit more, and then yeah, so okay, the 14 generations. So according to Matthew, all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, not 40, 14. So they've collapsed 800 years into, okay, there's the 40 generations. So for 800 years is 40 generations from David to the Babylonian exile. 14 generations omitting a few of David's descendants from Chronicles to make it fit. Da, 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 and then Luke collapses a further 2000. Yeah, okay, so Luke actually goes all the way back to Adam. So that's um, a further what do you call it? Divergence between Matthew and Luke.
So,
So
so how long is that genealogy, or that the length of the whole period? Like how many years? I have
I think
heard about that,
it's
something about 7,000 years or so.
yeah. Well, it says like so. Matthew's collapsing 800 years to get
Hmm.
to David. So I guess from Adam to David is 800 years.
Okay.
Um, yeah, something like that. Because as you know, like the young Earth creationists say that we're 6,000 years old because if you count the generations of the Bible, so the 2,000 now and then the 4,000 going back. So
So as per
um,
the Christian belief, the age of this whole of humanity is somewhere between 8,000 years.
about
Is that
6,000.
right?
Yeah, according to young Earth creationism, it's about 6,000 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you have you have so both you have so you can see how Matthew and Luke differ. Now, this is where the fun part comes in: is the Christian evangelicals say the Bible is literally true and without error. Well, I'm sorry, but these genealogies diverge; they contradict each other. First Chronicles 3, Matthew, Luke, they all contradict each other. So sorry, wrong. Thank you for playing. We have some nice parting gifts. Piss off. Right. Okay, so Bethlehem. Now, the reason why Matthew and Luke put the birth in Bethlehem is because in the book of Micah, it states that the Messiah will be born in the city of David, and David apparently comes from Bethlehem. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. Micah is a book, I believe, is also from the Assyrian period. It's from an earlier period in Judaism. So, and like Isaiah is the same way. There's actually three books in Isaiah. There's Isaiah 1, Isaiah 2, and Isaiah 3, because they're all written at very distinct periods in time because they're referencing events that could not have been written. Like the events in Isaiah 2 and 3 could not have been written at the time of Isaiah 1, at the time of the Assyrian conquest, because they hadn't happened yet, right? So the events in Isaiah 2 and 3 are talking about events that come later, like the Babylonian exile, the Second Temple era, so they cannot be referencing that. No, Micah is the same. Micah is an earlier book. The first two chapters are the earlier. No, the last. I think there's five chapters in Micah. So I think chapters 3 to 5. Don't quote me on this. I'm going completely on memory. That Micah 3 to 5. These are Second Temple era additions to a much earlier book. So the whole so going back to the Babylonian exile, this is where Messianism gets born. So you have the Assyrian exile that deports the people of the kingdom of Israel. Then you have the Babylonian exile about 100 years later. Babylonians come in and they destroy Judah, and they kill the king. They kill one king, and then another king. I guess another king is installed, and then they rebel and they take him and his family off to Babylon with the other exiles. And this is where Zerubbabel comes in. He's the exilarch. He's the king in exile. This is where Messianism gets born, right? Because Zerubbabel comes back, the messianic, which and all Messiah means is the anointed, right? Because kings are anointed, like when we saw with King Charles, he gets anointed with holy oils. That's all Messiah means, is just the anointed one. So Zerubbabel comes back, but he basically rejects the throne of the Davidic dynasty. So the messianic hope is that the Davidic dynasty will be reconstituted, and that morphs over time. So any references to messianism must therefore be can only come from the Second Temple era. This is just like um, um, what do you call it? I can't think of the word I want. Like geology, right? When you're looking at the stratigraphy in geology, excuse me, that if you find the dinosaur bone in the wrong strata, you know, it's something has happened. It's either been fake, someone's moved it, or it would completely throw evolution completely out of whack, right? If you suddenly find something from one era in a geological strata that belongs, right? It's the same thing with messianic claims belong squarely in the Second Temple era, and there are passages in pre pre-exile, pre-exilic books that make messianic passages. So they're obviously forgeries. They're insertions of the Second Temple era. That's where Micah comes from. Now, Micah, I think it's Micah 5:2 that states that the Messiah will come from the city of David, which is Bethlehem. Now, the other interesting thing is Micah is the last book of the Old Testament in the Christian Old Testament. In the Hebrew Bible, it's with the prophets, but they moved it specifically to put Micah at the very end of the Old Testament, prefacing the intro to Matthew, where Matthew's saying, like, behold of the one crying in the desert, crying in the wilderness, right? So Micah is moved to the very end of the Old Testament as a preface into the New Testament. So there's a lot of propaganda going on here with that. So that's where the whole virgin birth thing comes from, and all of this nonsense about the census, like having to go to Bethlehem at all. Like I'm sure Jesus was born in Galilee, whether it was Nazareth or somewhere else, who knows? But he was, by all accounts, he was a Galilean, not a Judean. As I mentioned, Galilee was ruled by one of the sons of Herod. So it was a completely different territory. Um, the massacre of the innocents that Herod killed all the firstborn, like that's obviously never happened. That's an allusion to Pharaoh. Again, there's all of these allusions in Matthew's very, very big on making allusions back to Moses, right? The 40 days, 40 years in the desert, excuse me. um and the massacre of Pharaoh massacring all the firstborn. So Matthew's making lots and lots of parallels into earlier ones. Luke, and I think so. Matthew states that they go into Egypt. Luke states they just return to Nazareth. So yeah, so that's sort of the basis for the virgin birth narrative. Now then along comes Augustine, Saint Augustine, in the late 300s, early 400s, who formulates the doctrine of original sin. Right. So because Jesus is born of a virgin, he has bypassed original sin, right? Because there's no sex act between Mary and Joseph. So the very fact that Jesus has bypassed original sin and that his sacrifice is, to atone for our sin, which, again, this goes back to, you know, the the Jewish concept of atonement. And on Passover, you bring your lambs to the temple to slaughter your lambs. So this whole concept that Jesus needed to be sacrificed to save humanity is barbaric. Like why would God need to sacrifice himself to himself to save himself from himself? It's ridiculous. Anybody who's thought about it, for even 5 seconds can see how silly it is. So, okay, so going then into some of the other stuff.
So,
So go ahead.
are you going to mention about the Santa Claus? Where does he come from?
Yeah, so that's my next slide. So
Okay,
you have Saint Nicholas, who's a fourth century Turkish bishop. He was known for his generosity, and there was legends that he would
Turkish.
just Turkish, yes.
Okay,
Saint Nicholas was Turkish. And then you have in the UK, you have Father Christmas. And then you have Santa Claus. So the Dutch in the US, they have Sinterklaas or Saint Nicholas. And then so Sinterklaas gets merged with Kris Kringle, and then Santa Claus, and then Coke comes along and they make a whole like, Coke ads. So, it's all really like that's where the red of Santa, it's Coke red. And apparently because the bishop's robes, well, the bishop's robes are technically purple, but the cardinal's robes are red. So Harper's Weekly in 1881 published the most famous image of Santa with the big belly and an armful of toys. 1931, the Coke Santa was drawn by an artist who's made him even larger than life.
mm,
Okay, so again, as I mentioned, the Christmas, no, the Yule log. So the Christmas tree, I said Tannenbaum is Nordic. Now the Yule log is the same thing. So Yule is the Germanic name for the winter solstice, which we talked about earlier. That Christmas is tied into to Saturnalia, to Sol Invictus, to the winter solstice. Now,
okay.
originally, an entire tree was brought into the home, and it's slowly, so the Yule log, right? It's fed into the fire over the, get it, 12 days of Christmas, right? So traditionally, evergreen fir trees were used to celebrate winter festivals for thousands of years. Pagans would use branches to decorate their homes in winter uh, because it would allow them to think of becoming spring. Romans used fir trees in their temples at the festival of Saturnalia, and Christians use it as a sign of everlasting life. Holly. No, the prickly leaves represent the crown of thorns that Jesus wore when he was crucified, and the berries are the drops of blood. Mistletoe goes back to the ancient Druids. They believed that it possessed mystical powers to bring good luck, and it's used as a sign of love and friendship in Norse mythology. Now, ivy needs support. Like ivy has to grow on something that needs support. So this is to remind us that we have to cling to God for our support. So holly, ivy, and other greenery are all pre-Christian. They're used in the winter solstice to ward off evil spirits and to celebrate the rebirth as spring is coming, and to give it a little bit of color in winter, right when everything is white and dark. Oh, okay, yeah. So on one of my slides, do yeah. So Micah 5:2. But thou Bethlehem, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel. So that's Micah 5:2, which I mentioned before. And just to oh, no, of course, Bart Ehrman. Okay, so yeah, so that is essentially the idea of where the Christmas beliefs come from and where some of the imagery and traditional iconography of Christmas comes from.
Mhm.
Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold, so
Yeah.
apologies to our viewers as I'm coughing and sniffling. So, any questions from you, Hussein, or any of our viewers have any questions about some Christmas traditions or some Christian origins that would like me to answer or address? Or I've
Yeah,
pretty
my
much
take
covered it all.
Yeah, my take on this Christmas traditions that I see or I can witness these days is something which I am so much uh, what I would say,
Hmm.
which is something which is uh, okay for the modern people, where it takes out the best part of any religious festivities and they just use it in that way to improve the human connections, like making it as an option for people to engage, to hold on to their associations, like to be with their friends or with their families and other things. So it's quite okay with people doing that. That's what I always believe. Um, why I say this is because when I, as a person coming from the Islamic background, we don't have such a thing. Even if you come out of this religion, you don't have an option to engage in a religious festival, in a celebration, without being a part of that as a religious person. So if you are only a religious person, you can be a part of that celebration. If you are not a religious person, you are not believing in that, there's no place for you. That is how Islam exists today. And that's one reason an ex-Muslim is always seen as an outcast and is not invited for any of these celebrations, even at their home. So, but at the same time, I'm seeing people, even if they are ex-Christians or ex-Hindus, they don't just care about uh, their religious backing, their religious beliefs, whether it is present or not. Still, they are enjoying the celebrations just like anyone else. So that's the core difference, which I can feel, which I can see, and which I am jealous about. So I think this should be encouraged more and more. If
Hmm.
our aim as atheists is to dilute some of the most toxic religions, I think that will be the best way to give such toxic religions a chance to witness how these people do it, and people take it, and they don't have a kind of uh, enmity towards any religion. So I think that will be the best way. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, you see it all over the world. Like
Mm,
I don't live in a Christian country yet. I can't walk through a shopping mall without being bombarded with Christmas decorations and Christian Christmas carols, even though I don't even
mm,
live in in a Christian country. It's everywhere. Um, somebody told me last year, one of my friends, he travels to China a lot, and I worked in China, and I was actually worked Christmas Day. The only time I've ever worked Christmas Day was Christmas in 2017 because I was working in
mm,
China, and it's not a holiday there. And the malls were all festooned with Christmas decorations and carols, but apparently the Chinese government is cracking down on that because it's too Western. So my friend who works in China a lot was saying, yeah, like the you don't really see it in China, like at least not last year, and presumably this year that the Chinese government has really cracked down on the Christmas imagery because of it's so strongly Western, and they're trying to fight um, that influence. So,
mhm.
but
Have you
yeah,
seen some
but
of the posts that's made by people like Zakir Naik, telling that celebrating Christmas is haram? A true Muslim wouldn't ever celebrate Christmas. So such things, have
well,
you come across?
no, but you mean the Quran does mention Jesus and Mary. I
But not Christmas.
No, but I mean, they recognize Jesus as a prophet, so I can see how they would object to the what do you call it to Christmas, but they believe Jesus was a prophet, so I can see yes and no. You could honor Jesus as a prophet of God, but not as God. That
Mhm.
he's not this three. But I read somewhere within the last few months, I think Mary is actually mentioned more in the Quran, more
Hmm.
times than she is in the New Testament, which would be, I don't know if that's true. I haven't bothered to check, but interesting. So, but I know I do, Mary and Joseph do get mentioned in the Quran.
Yeah, I agree to that. You can find more of Mary mentioned in Quran, but the reason could be this way. That is, in the beginning years of Islam, when Muhammad started preaching Islam to his own people, he took it took a diplomatic way of doing that, an approach whereby he was always trying to make parallels between Judaism and Christianity, and he was
Yeah,
just trying to say that this is the last prophet. He's just completing whatever things were present before. So
yeah,
that's
is like
how he
that's
was trying to
good.
say.
That goes back to the earlier point. Islam is totally
Yeah,
syncretic with
yeah,
Judeo-Christianity.
yeah,
Because there were Jewish tribes in Arabia, there were some Christian sects, there were Christian sects in Ethiopia. Um, if anyone is interested in reading it, I would highly recommend Volume One of the New Cambridge History of Islam, which has multiple articles written by scholars that talk about the origins and beginnings of in Volume One of Islam, that talk about the links to the Jewish and Christian tribes in Arabia as well. In Arabia, you have the Ghassanids, who were a client. They were a client kingdom of the Byzantines, and the Lakhmids, who were a client kingdom of the Persians. And so they're fighting proxy wars. They're both in Arabia, but one is at one. So the Ghassanids are Orthodox Christians, and the Lakhmids are Nestorian Christians. So the Nestorian Christians really come to influence Islam in a big way. So if anyone's really interested in checking that out, I would highly recommend Volume One of the New Cambridge History of Islam. It gives some great, fascinating insights into the origins of Islam and how it developed, um,
hmm,
and how Muhammad made concessions to the Quraysh in Mecca. Like originally Muslims prayed to Jerusalem, but then
yeah.
in a nod to the Quraysh tribe of Mecca, they changed it to Mecca, right? Because they're pragmatic, because there's money involved, right?
And
This
that
is a
too
big
by the
trading hub.
orders of Umar, not by
Yeah,
himself.
yeah.
Yeah, so
So
that's how it was made to work. So most of the some of the main laws in Islam were um, brought into the religion not by Muhammad or by Allah, but by the wishes of Umar. He wanted to make such orders, and the best example for that is the rules regarding hijab. So such an rule was not present in Islam, and there was no intention, even with Muhammad, to make that kind of a rule. But later on, Umar was insisting Muhammad to make such a rule to so that he can eve tease some of the women present over there, and accidentally some of the wives of Muhammad was caught in between while doing this eve teasing, and they complained to Muhammad. So that's one reason when Prophet Muhammad came on one fine morning and just made the rule by reciting an ayat or the verse. So that's how it was made in Islam. So Umar
yeah.
was instrumental in devising some of the best rules in Islam, just like the hijab rule. Yes. So
Cool.
I think we can just show an image um, on how Islam teaches, or the opinion of Islam with regards to how. Uh, 1 second. Can I share a? Okay, I'll do one thing. Okay, this is something which is being mentioned by Zakir Naik, and the opinion or how Islam views the celebration of Christmas, how it can be a problem in Islam. I hope you can see that.
When what people don't realize that when you are wishing Merry Christmas, you are agreeing that Jesus Christ was born on the 25th of December, and agreeing that he is the begotten Son of God. Yeah,
Na'udhu which is shirk.
I, I, I can see his point.
Yeah.
Um, but as we said, like Christmas, Christmas has really lost its origins for, all the secularists, and even many Christians, like, just, the casual Christians. Christmas is, just another day. It's a day of family and togetherness and celebration. So, it's become much more, it's gone way beyond its origins to being something much more commercial and just a time of family togetherness. So, but I can see his point that, you're agreeing that Jesus, and I that's my personal pet peeve. Like I walk through the malls and I hear these Christmas carols and the meaning, joy to the world, the Lord is come, like, you know, all of these Christmas carols, like the wording is very, very explicit that, Jesus is the Son of God who's come to save mankind. So, as an atheist, it does offend my ears that I can't go into a public space, even in non-Christian countries, and not be assaulted by all of these carols everywhere.
Hmm.
So.
But we have seen a rising incidence of attacks over the Christmas carols, Christmas trees getting burned, and even last day we saw an incident where an ex-Muslim terrorist who was um, ploughing the car into a crowd in a Christmas market in Germany. So there are some problems with his background, whether he was doing this takia and other things. So we are just keeping it aside. But as of now, what we know about that is he was from Saudi Arabia and he was living in Germany as an exile on exile, and he was too much anti-Islam. So that was his background was. But still now, when he does this, we even saw a video where when he was getting arrested, he was shouting Allahu Akbar. So I don't know why this ex-Muslim shouts Allahu Akbar, because no ex-Muslim would say
Well,
that.
well,
Yeah.
the some of the theories we've seen floating around is that he
Mm,
claimed to be an ex-Muslim, but that was a false front, that he was really an Islamic zealot,
mm,
a Muslim zealot who's trying to entrap ex-Muslims, but that he wasn't an ex-Muslim. He was pretending to be one to get close to ex-Muslims, so because he could expose them as a Muslim zealot.
yeah. Here's a question for you. Does the jingle bell,
I've never heard this question before.
slavery?
I would assume the bells because the bells are on the sleighs, right? Like the sleigh
Mm,
bells.
mm,
Not nothing I wouldn't think it has anything to do with slavery, but I could be wrong. But I would assume the bells come from the sleighs. So
okay. Was that a kind of a sarcastic question?
no,
Something
and he
new?
is asking about Santa and Coke. So maybe Ronald, you came in after I mentioned that.
Okay.
Let me just do a quick search. Okay, in 1931, the
Hmm.
classic Coke Santa was drawn by artist Haddon Sundblom. He took the idea but made him even more larger than life and jolly. So yeah, so um, the red of Santa is Coke Red. January 1st, 1881, Harper's Weekly publishes the most famous image of Santa with big red belly, an armful of toys. And then in 1931, Coke appropriates Santa. So yeah,
Yeah.
so there's definitely a connection between Coke and Santa. So
Okay. So that I hope that clears.
yeah.
So I think this makes our Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
How about yours?
Yeah. Go spend some time with my wife, even though she's planning to take my laptop once I'm done and keep working. So
Okay.
cool. Well,
Anyway,
Merry
so
Christmas, everybody. Happy holidays, happy Hanukkah,
yeah,
happy Kwanzaa, whatever your thing is, just joy and peace and love and friendship,
that's it.
and try to be decent people to each other. So
Engage
Merry
with
Christmas to everybody.
your people. Yeah. Love
Yeah.
each other and
A
coexist.
secular holiday wishes to all. So all
Yeah.
right. Take care,
And
everybody.
don't bring and don't bring in religion just like Zakir Naik did here. Like even when the Christians are moving away from the spiritual and the religious part of Christmas, and they are just taking up the the festivities in that manner. Some people like Zakir Naik is trying to even bring or to inject the religion again and again. So just beware of such people. So we want coexistence. We want peace and harmony. So let's go with that. That's our
Peace on
aim.
earth.
So,
That's
Merry
the whole
Christmas.
point of Christmas. Peace on earth,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
yeah.
Have a safe and happy holidays. Everyone, don't drink too much. Don't eat too much. Everything in moderation. Be safe. Drive safe. And we'll see everybody next week. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.
Yes. Bye. Yes.
Oh, where's our outro? Was not ready. I was so busy talking. Where is our? There we go. Is that it?
Jingle bells, jingle all the way.
I
I
can't
have,
find it. You've got the
yeah.
outro? Okay, I can't find it.
Okay.
There it is. I see it. Bye, everybody.